What's up, internet? Today I'll be showing you how to control the value of this using call, bind, and apply. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more beginner-friendly JavaScript tutorials. Now, to understand this and some of the problems that might arise when using it, I have 3 examples I'd like to cover. First, I want to mention that this is a keyword you can use to refer to objects when you're running methods and functions. And we're doing just that in this example. Number 1, we have a person, and it's assigned to a value of an object. And within this object, we're using a greet method, and it's using this to refer to Alice within the person object. Now, sometimes this, when you're using it, doesn't always work the way you expect. And we see that here when we run person.greet, we first store it in a variable and then call it later at a later date. And we're getting just hi, I'm when we run this. Now, you might be wondering, well, why does that not work when we can run person.greet, and when we call this, you'll see that this works just fine. Hi, I'm Alice. So why are we not working now? Well, we're losing the context of person. So greet gets its context by whatever's left of the period. And so as soon as we store it in a variable, we lose that because we're just storing the method of just greet and this action, and we're just calling it later, but we've lost it. And now this is just going to refer to the window object in the browser or the global object in Node. And sometimes you might be seeing undefined if it's going to be that strict mode. And so we lose that context. And in order to fix that, you're going to want to go ahead and use bind. So the 3 types we're going to work around or talk about and the ways to work around this not working the way you expect is with bind, call, or apply. And bind here, we're doing the exact same thing as above, but we're just adding .bind. And so we're doing person.greet.bind. We're placing person within bind to let this know that essentially, no matter where this function goes with this method, we want to keep this pointing to person. So this is pointing to this object of person. And then when we call this later, we get back, hi, I'm Alice. So that's the first example. We also have call and apply, as I mentioned, and I want to cover those. And really the difference between call and apply and bind is run for a later date. You're storing it for later, loading it up, and call and apply is run immediately. And then the difference between call and apply is that we have call, which is going to store arguments separated by commas, and apply is going to separate arguments within an array. And to cover this example, we have a function, which is, again, another introduction of greet. We have some parameters of shift and time. And if we were just to run this as normal, you would see that we're not getting back, we're just really getting hi undefined, essentially. And that's because we are referring to that window object in the browser. And we don't have this context yet. We're using this.name, but we haven't yet attached what this is supposed to refer to. In order to attach what we want, in this case using the user Bob, we want to go ahead and use call and apply. And so, see that here. And call and apply are first going to take in that object of Bob, and then it's going to give that context for this. And then it's going to take in those parameters, or really take in the arguments for the parameters. And we'll see that when we run this, we can see what we expect. Good day, I'm Bob, and good night, I'm Bob. How was your morning? How was your evening? So that's working well. So we learned about bind, call, and apply. And now to really tie this all home, I have a third and final example. First, comment this out. And this final example is a bit more practical. Let's say you have a website and it's wanting to generate invoices for clients. And so essentially what we're doing here is we're doing an example where we're using a callback. So we have a client with, again, we have some properties of Emma, the service of a web design. We have a method of generating an invoice for Emma and spitting back a message in the console. Now, what we're doing here is we are having a function outside of this client where we want to then send this invoice. And so when we send this invoice, we're gonna run the callback, which is going to be generate invoice, and the amount. We're gonna specify the amount, and then we're gonna run this. So we're gonna be sending the invoice to the client. And what's happening is we're going to put client A.generate invoice within, and then give the amount and run this. And what happens is when we run this, we get invoice for undefined, as like so. And same as storing a method in a variable, if we're putting this in a callback, we are losing this context because it's run at a later date you can think of. And so we're losing this context of whatever's left of the period. It's no longer there. And so in order to retain that context, we're going to use .bind to bind this to the client so that when we run this later, the context still remains. And so we will see that when we run this later, we get back invoice for Emma, web design, $500. Now, another benefit is we can have, efficient code with this as well. By using this instead of making a built-in value, this allows a bit more flexibility. And so we could have a second client. Let's say we have Liam, and we want to use client A's method of generate invoice. And so now we're using client A's method, but by attaching .call, we can run that immediately, and we're storing client B this time. So now we want this to refer to client B. Even though the method's stored in client A, we want to attach this to refer to client B and the amount. And if we run this, we get back invoice for Liam SEO consulting, $300. And so you can see here the power of flexibility when you have this. And so why exactly? We already touched on it a little bit, but why are we losing callbacks? Well, when a method is passing a callback, it just becomes a plain function. We are losing that association that we once had because it's really for future use. The original object's no longer attached, so this becomes undefined. And by binding the function before passing it in, bind, as we mentioned, is used for a later date, call and apply or run immediately. We can then retain that reference to the object client A and run it correctly. Let's recap what we learned. We learned that bind returns a new function with this fix, and you should use it when passing around a function. We also learned about call and apply, which immediately evoke a function, and apply, the only difference between call and apply is that apply uses an array of arguments.